If you saw something for sale labeled as haunted object, would you buy it? Have you ever bought a haunted item? What if it was haunted, but not labeled as such? How would you know? Thrift stores, antique stores, second-hand stores, who knows what all we're taking home with us? Case in point, in Christmas 2020, a family in Brandon, Mississippi allegedly found this out the hard way. What was meant to be a child's Christmas gift brought more into the home than what was originally bargained for. Everyone loves a good, strange, weird, or bizarre story. Well, welcome to the American South, where dark legends and haunted history lurk around every corner. Where superstition, folklore, and a touch of backwoods magic blend with everyday culture. Some say, in order to survive. This is Dixie After Dark. How about a more recent story? It was Christmas 2020 in Brandon, Mississippi, and the Merritt family was excited about their first Christmas in their new home. Whitney and Michael Merritt impatiently waited for Christmas morning with their 3 children. Among all of the gifts under the tree was a vintage doll carriage, acquired by Whitney's mother from a friend of a friend. Christmas came and went, and the family enjoyed every minute of it. Of course, the doll carriage was loved as a gift, and no doubt was used over and over by the daughter that received it. Then the new year came, and with it, 3 weeks of alleged paranormal activity that pushed the family to their breaking points. The haunting began with knocking around the family's home. Since it was a newer home, logically the parents brushed this off as perhaps the new home was still settling. But then the knockings grew stronger, at several points causing Whitney to think someone was at the front door. Maybe her husband had come home early from his night shift and couldn't get the door open. When checked, there was never anyone there. Around the 3rd or 4th night, the family says the knocks turned to heavy booms coming from the attic. These loud bangs grew in frequency to where they could no longer be ignored. One night, during one such episode, Michael went into the attic himself, armed with a flashlight and shotgun. Not surprisingly, he found no one. All of this in the span of 1 week. In the 2nd week, Whitney was awakened one night by a loud crash. Her first thought was that the family dog had crashed through a window. She immediately grabbed a handgun and went to investigate, but found nothing out of place. That morning, in the kitchen, Whitney found a shopping bag on the ground. The bag contained some coffee mugs she had recently purchased and left on the kitchen table. She stated that the bag was found 3 or 4 feet away from the table, and both mugs were broken. The next night, the same thing happened. Another broken coffee mug was discovered in the kitchen floor. Whitney swept up the mess and turned to leave. That's when she reported hearing what sounded like a handful of silverware being dropped into the sink. She went back into the kitchen, expecting to find something that had slipped or fell, but there was nothing in the sink. Nothing at all. At this point, Whitney was freaked out, and understandably not getting that much sleep. Then came the 3rd week of their haunting. The Merritt's daughter kept reporting a dream catcher in her room repeatedly falling to the floor. After the second plea from their daughter, both Michael and Whitney went to investigate. Then the bathroom door slammed shut behind them. At first, they thought it was one of the other children going to the bathroom. Then, Michael noticed at the base of the door that the lights never came on. Michael opened the bathroom door, and there was no one there. He spent the next several minutes checking out the door, trying to make sense of what had happened, even looking for a draft or anything that could have caused the door to slam shut. But he never found anything, and the door never moved again. The next day, one of the children's toys started playing music on its own. When Whitney checked, the power switch was turned off. Later that evening, Whitney woke Michael up so he could start getting ready for his night shift job, then returned to the living room. After a few minutes, she saw Michael go into the kitchen for a cup of coffee. Whitney called out to him to tell him about the toy car from earlier in the day, but Michael never responded. She called out to him again, but still there was no response. Frustrated that she wasn't being believed or simply being ignored, Whitney marched into the kitchen, only to find it empty. She went back to the bedroom and found Michael asleep in the bed still. "I saw him," Whitney tells local news WLBT. "I swear on my kids I'm not crazy." The day after that came the family's final straw. Whitney was grocery shopping with their youngest daughter. The other daughter was at their grandmother's house, and their 7-year-old son was at school. It was 12:30 in the afternoon when Michael called Whitney. Michael called to ask if their son was at home. Whitney said no, he was at school. The call seemed simple enough, but when Whitney got home, Michael explained what prompted his call. Michael said he was in bed, but woke up to the sound of the front door closing. Then he heard the son's bedroom door close, followed by knocking on the walls. Michael called out to him several times, but got no response. He then got out of bed to check on his son, but there was no one in the bedroom. There, Michael found the lights on, a gaming console turned on, and a bottle of water that had just been spilled, the water still running from the open mouth of the bottle. At this point, Michael and Whitney started trying to figure out why and when all of these strange things started happening. That's when Michael fixated on the old baby carriage. He couldn't tell you why, but he just knew that was what was causing everything. He immediately took the carriage outside, and since then, everything has been normal. There were no more sounds from the attic, no more knocking, no more slamming doors. The old doll carriage was placed then on eBay, and a full disclosure was put in the description as to the alleged hauntings. The doll carriage sold for $710 to a woman in Kansas who claims to be fascinated by ghosts and spirits. Now, I couldn't help but notice that the initial news report about the haunting went up before the follow-up news story about the baby carriage selling. I'll link both news articles in the description below for anyone that's interested. I truly believe an individual object can have some sort of spiritual attachment in some circumstances, but I'll also admit that the selling of the item after the initial story puts a bit of doubt in my mind. Is it possible that someone genuinely stumbled across the eBay listing and a bidding war broke out without previously seeing the news article? Sure, I've seen that happen before. I just thought it'd be fair to acknowledge the 9-day gap between the two articles. Whitney did report that she eventually uncovered some of the backstory on the carriage. Her own mother, who had gotten the carriage for the family originally, said that the owner's husband had been killed in a motorcycle accident. She says it's possible that's who she saw enter the kitchen that day. Maybe. But does it really explain the other events? Why would the spirit of a man that died in a motorcycle accident attach to an antique doll carriage? Lots of questions with this one. Let's give them all the benefit of the doubt, though. If all this really happened and was caused by the old baby carriage, then we should be seeing some stories come out of Kansas very soon. While we wait for that, stay safe, everyone, and mind your secondhand purchases.